Beggar girl reveals missing millionaire's daughter, but when they do a DNA test, they discover something. Comment giving my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. A light rain drizzled on the tombstones of the cemetery as the widowed millionaire knelt before the empty grave. His blue eyes, normally bright as sapphires, were red and swollen from crying. At 30 years old, he possessed the good looks of a Hollywood heartthrob, but at that moment, he looked like a man shattered by the deepest pain a father could feel. 6 months had passed since the disappearance of his 4-year-old daughter, and each day was a renewed torture. His fortune accumulated through smart investments on Wall Street seemed worthless in the face of the emptiness consuming his chest. All the money in the world couldn't buy back his little girl's clear laughter, nor her morning races through the halls of the mansion. He had hired the best private detectives, offered multi-million-dollar rewards, used all his influential contacts. Nothing. His daughter had simply vanished like smoke, leaving only a room full of toys and a pain that seemed endless. The beggar girl watched from afar, hidden behind an old tombstone. Only 4 years old, but appearing to be 2 due to severe malnutrition, she knew suffering well. Her torn and dirty clothes contrasted with the impeccable suit of the man who wept, but there was something in her large, dark eyes that showed a wisdom impossible for her age. She had seen that man before, in the magazines she sometimes found in the trash. A successful businessman who had built a financial empire, always photographed at social events of high society. But there, at that moment, he was just a father broken by loss. The girl approached silently, her bare feet making no noise on the wet grass. When she was a few feet away from him, she whispered in her fragile voice, "I heard your daughter calling." The man raised his head sharply, his eyes meeting those of the dirty child standing before him. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating. Who was this girl? What was she doing there? "What did you say?" he asked, his voice hoarse from crying. "Your daughter. I heard her calling for you," the girl repeated without looking away. "She's alive." The millionaire felt his heart race. For months, people had taken advantage of his despair, inventing false stories in exchange for money. But there was something different about this child. Her eyes didn't lie. "Where? Where did you hear her?" he asked, getting up quickly and kneeling before the girl to be at her height. "Come with me," she said simply, turning and starting to walk towards the exit of the cemetery. The man hesitated for a moment. Following an unknown child through the dangerous streets of the outskirts didn't seem wise, but despair was stronger than reason. He had lost everything that mattered. What difference did it make to risk the rest? He followed the girl through the narrow and poorly lit streets, far from the upscale neighborhood where he lived. The contrast was shocking, from the wide, tree-lined avenues to dirty alleys where sewage ran in the open. His wallet was full of money, his wrists sported expensive watches, but none of that mattered at that moment. The girl walked with determination, knowing every corner, every alley. She had learned to survive in those hostile streets, sleeping in doorways of closed stores, eating leftovers found in the trash. But 3 days ago, while seeking shelter from the rain, she had discovered something that would change everything. "It's here," she said, stopping in front of an abandoned building. The structure was in ruins, with broken windows and peeling walls. It seemed like the last place someone would look for a missing child. "Here where?" asked the millionaire, looking around suspiciously. The girl pointed to a side entrance, almost hidden by rubble. "Downstairs. There's a place downstairs." They descended a steep and poorly maintained staircase that led to a damp basement. The smell of mold was strong, and the darkness was almost total. The man turned on the flashlight on his cell phone, illuminating a small, stuffy space. And then he saw her. His daughter was there, lying on an old mattress covered by a torn blanket. She was very thin and pale, but alive. Next to her, a middle-aged woman cowered in the corner, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Daddy?" whispered the girl, hardly believing what she saw. The millionaire ran to her, picking her up in his arms with extreme care. She was weak, but breathing. She was alive. After 6 months of nightmare, he finally had her back. "Who are you?" he asked the woman, who was trembling in the corner of the basement. I didn't want to hurt her," the woman stammered, tears running down her face. My daughter is gone, and I didn't know how to return." The reality of the situation began to form in the millionaire's mind. That woman had taken his daughter, but not out of malice. She was a desperate mother who had lost her own child and, in a moment of total madness, had tried to fill the void by taking his. But now his daughter needed urgent medical care. And the beggar girl, who had made all this possible, was still there, watching in silence, as if she knew that her life was also about to change forever. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue, and the most expensive private hospital in the metropolis had become the millionaire's second home. His daughter was recovering slowly, but the doctors were optimistic. Malnutrition had caused damage, but nothing irreversible with proper treatment. During this period, a decision had completely changed the dynamics of the situation. The millionaire had taken the beggar girl to his luxurious mansion, feeling that he owed everything to her. Without that courageous child, he would never have found his daughter. It was his responsibility to take care of her now, but the adaptation was being a nightmare. The girl, accustomed to the harshness of the streets, could not adjust to the sophisticated environment. The expensive furniture intimidated her, the new clothes felt uncomfortable on her skin, and the abundant food made her sick after months of eating only leftovers. She cried every night, huddled in the corner of the luxurious room they had given her, sobbing softly until she fell asleep from exhaustion. "She doesn't stop crying," complained the cruel stepmother, the millionaire's younger sister, while drinking her breakfast coffee in the main hall. At 25 years old, she was an ambitious woman who managed part of the family business and always saw her brother's fortune as her natural inheritance. "This is disturbing the whole house." The stepmother had built an impeccable reputation in high society, known for her elegance and business acumen. She managed investments in stocks and bonds that generated substantial profits for the family. But the presence of that dirty child in her perfect home infuriated her in ways she could barely control. "She needs time," replied the millionaire, tired of his sister's constant criticism. "She spent years on the streets. She won't adapt overnight." "And how long do you intend to maintain this charity?" she asked, the word coming out of her mouth like poison. "People are starting to talk. Just yesterday, at the club meeting, I heard comments about the inadequacy of the situation. Indeed, rumors had begun to spread through the city's elite. A beggar child living in the mansion of one of the richest men in the region. It was scandal enough to fuel gossip for months. The stepmother had taken it upon herself to subtly spread these conversations, planting seeds of doubt about her brother's decision. The loyal housekeeper, a 60-year-old lady who had worked for the family for 3 decades, watched everything in growing silence. She had seen the girl crying in the garden, trying to draw birds in the dirt with a stick. She had witnessed the contemptuous looks of the younger mistress and the frustrated attempts of the master to comfort the child. But what tormented her most was the secret she carried. On the morning of the millionaire's daughter's disappearance, she had seen a strange woman lurking around the property. She had noticed the suspicious behavior, but said nothing because she was afraid of being fired. At 60 years old, without a family of her own, that job was all she had. Guilt consumed her every day. If she had spoken, perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a discovery was about to shake the millionaire even further. During a therapy session to help his daughter process the trauma, the child psychologist revealed something devastating. "Your daughter told me that she ran away from home that day," said the doctor, her words falling like bombs on the father's heart. She said that you had argued because you never had time for her. The memory came back like a punch to the stomach. On that fateful morning, his daughter had asked him not to go to work. She wanted him to stay and play with her. But he had an important meeting with international investors, an opportunity to expand his business and further increase his wealth. He had been rude to her, saying that he couldn't waste time on childish games. His own negligence as a workaholic father had contributed to his daughter's disappearance. The irony was cruel. While accumulating wealth and capital, he had lost what really mattered. Back at the mansion, the situation with the beggar girl was deteriorating rapidly. She had stopped talking completely, only shaking her head when asked questions. The food remained untouched on the plate, and she spent hours looking out the window towards the distant streets, like a caged bird dreaming of freedom. The stepmother took advantage of this behavior to intensify her campaign against the child's presence. During a dinner with important guests, investors who moved millions in diverse funds, she commented casually on the challenges of dealing with traumatized children. "It's a very delicate situation," she said, sighing dramatically. "As much as my brother has good intentions, sometimes love is not enough. This poor child clearly doesn't adapt to our environment." The guests agreed politely, but the millionaire felt each word like a stab. He was being judged by people who saw his attempt to help a vulnerable child as an eccentric whim. That night, when he went to check if the girl was sleeping, he found her awake in the dark, whispering to herself. When he approached, he realized that she was humming a sad melody, a song that spoke of free birds flying away from pain. "Do you want to go back to the streets?" he asked gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. The girl looked at him with those big, dark eyes, full of a sadness that broke his heart. Slowly, she shook her head. She didn't want to go back to hunger and cold, but she couldn't belong to that world of luxury either, which made her feel like an intruder. "Is your daughter coming back soon?" she asked in her small voice, the first words she had spoken in days. "Yes, she's coming back soon," he replied, stroking the girl's hair. "And when she comes back, you two will get along very well." But what he didn't know was that the next day he would receive a call that would change everything again. The slum community where the girl had grown up was organizing to demand her return. They claimed that a poor child should not be torn from her roots to live in a world that would never be truly hers. And even worse, his lawyer had discovered irregularities in the girl's temporary guardianship papers. With no known living relatives, the legal situation was complex, and people interested in creating problems could easily question his authority to care for her. The cruel stepmother smiled when she heard about the call. Finally, she would have the tools she needed to get rid of that troublesome child and protect the inheritance she considered rightfully hers. The return of the millionaire's daughter home should have been a moment of pure joy, but it turned into something much more complex. The girl, still fragile after months of captivity, developed an obsessive attachment to the little beggar who had made her rescue possible. She refused to sleep alone, ate only when the other child was present, and panicked whenever they were separated. "She understands me," said the millionaire's daughter, holding the beggar girl's hand tightly. "She also knows what it's like to be afraid." The connection between the two children was deep and disturbing. Both had faced immense traumas, although of different natures. The rich daughter had experienced the terror of kidnapping, while the beggar knew the constant cruelty of life on the streets. Together, they found comfort that no adult could offer. The situation was further complicated when representatives of the slum community appeared at the mansion. The community leader, a strong woman of 50 years who had known the beggar girl's mother, was determined to bring her back. "This child belongs to our world," she declared, her eyes shining with indignation. "You can't just tear her from her roots because you have money. She needs to grow up among her own." The millionaire tried to explain that he only wanted to help, that the girl was being well cared for, but the words sounded empty even to him. How could he argue against people who genuinely cared about the child's well-being? Her mother worked as a cleaning lady to support this girl, continued the community leader. She didn't want her daughter to be raised by rich strangers who would always see her as a charity project. While this battle unfolded, the cruel stepmother was busy implementing her own plans. She had discovered the name of an ambitious lawyer, known for taking questionable cases in exchange for generous payments. The 45-year-old man had a dubious reputation, but he was exactly what she needed. The temporary guardianship papers have several irregularities, explained the lawyer during a secret meeting in his office. I can legally question your brother's ability to adequately care for both children, especially considering that one of them is not biologically his. And how much would you charge for this service? Asked the stepmother, already mentally calculating how much she could pay without it appearing in the family's financial records. Let's just say it would be a lucrative partnership for both of us, he replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. If we can get the girl out of the house, I would receive a percentage of the dividend income from the family investments. A small fee for services rendered. The blackmail was clear, but the stepmother was willing to pay any price to get rid of that child she saw as a threat to her future. Meanwhile, the loyal housekeeper continued to carry the weight of her guilt. She watched the two girls playing together in the garden, drawing birds in the dirt with sticks, and felt her heart break. She had failed to protect one child when she had the chance, and now she saw another being threatened by forces she couldn't fight. One morning, unable to bear the silence any longer, she sought out the millionaire in his study. "Sir, I need to tell you something about the day your daughter disappeared," she said, her hands trembling as she clutched her apron. "What do you mean?" he asked, raising his eyes from the papers he was examining. "I saw a strange woman lurking around the property that morning. She seemed disturbed, talking to herself, but I was afraid to speak up. I thought it was just my paranoia." The impact of this revelation was devastating. If the housekeeper had spoken up, security could have been tightened, the kidnapping could have been prevented, but she had chosen silence for fear of losing her job, and a child had paid the price. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, struggling to control the anger that was growing in his chest. I need this job, sir. At 60 years old without family, this job is all I have. I thought if I raised a false alarm, I would be fired." The confession brought a new layer of guilt to the entire situation. How many other people had failed to protect his daughter for selfish reasons? How many opportunities to prevent the tragedy had been lost through fear and negligence? That same week, a violent storm hit the metropolis. Strong winds and heavy rain caused damage throughout the city, and the mansion did not escape unscathed. During the early morning, lightning struck the property's electrical grid, and part of the roof collapsed, forcing everyone to take refuge in the basement. In the darkness and cold of the cellar, the two girls hugged each other, trembling not only from the weather but from the memories that the claustrophobic environment awakened. The millionaire's daughter remembered the basement where she had been held prisoner, while the beggar relived the cold nights sleeping in dark alleys. "Don't be afraid," they whispered to each other, their voices mingling in the darkness. "We're together now." It was at that moment, observing the strength that the two children found in each other, that the millionaire had a revelation. It wasn't just about saving one girl from the streets or protecting his daughter from trauma. It was about family, about connections that transcended blood and money. But the next day, a letter would arrive that would change everything again. The woman who had kidnapped his daughter, hospitalized for psychiatric treatment since the rescue, had sent a message that would reveal unexpected connections between all the tragedies that had shaped their lives. The letter contained a revelation that no one could have foreseen. She knew the beggar girl's mother, not just as two strangers who crossed paths in life, but in a much deeper and more painful way. The beggar's mother had worked as a cleaning lady at the hospital where the disturbed woman's own daughter had died, and had been one of the last people to care for the dying child. This discovery would open a new perspective on all the events that had unfolded, revealing that the tragedies of their lives were connected in ways that none of them could have imagined. And even worse, a deeper investigation would reveal that the millionaire's own company had a sinister connection to the beggar girl's suffering. The letter from the hospitalized woman revealed a truth that destroyed any peace the millionaire had found. His construction company had illegally demolished the only shelter where the beggar girl had protection during the coldest nights. The abandoned building was officially condemned, but served as a refuge for dozens of street children. The forced demolition had happened 2 years ago, pushing these children into even more dangerous situations. "My mother always talked about the blue building," said the beggar girl in her small voice, when the millionaire gently asked her about the shelter. "It was where we slept when it rained a lot. There were other boys and girls there." The guilt that was already gnawing at the rich man's heart multiplied exponentially. Not only had he failed as a father, allowing his daughter to run away from home, but he had also contributed directly to the suffering of the child who had saved his family. His obsessive pursuit of profit and expansion of his wealth had cost the safety of dozens of vulnerable children. The external pressure continued to increase. An investigative journalist had begun to question the methods used in the rescue of the millionaire's daughter. How had a street child managed to locate the kidnapping victim when professional detectives had failed? Why hadn't the family alerted the authorities immediately? The questions multiplied, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that threatened to destroy the family's reputation. "You need to understand that my reputation is also at stake," said the family lawyer during a tense meeting. "If this case blows up in the media the wrong way, I could lose important clients. Maybe it's better to turn the girl over to Child Protective Services before the situation gets out of control." Meanwhile, the cruel stepmother had managed to bribe a social worker who worked on child custody cases. The man, indebted due to gambling addictions, agreed to publicly question the millionaire's ability to adequately care for both children. An unstable home environment, with one child traumatized by kidnapping and another with street traumas, he wrote in his fabricated report. "I recommend an immediate reassessment of the family situation to protect the well-being of the minors." The forged document reached the competent authorities, triggering a formal investigation that could result in the removal of both children from the home. The stepmother smiled when she heard the news, feeling that she had finally found the perfect weapon to get rid of the obstacles to her inheritance. Despair took over the millionaire. For weeks, he had tried to balance the pressures from all sides, but now he felt he was losing the battle. One night, watching the two girls sleeping together in the room, he had a terrible thought: to flee with them to a distant place where no one could find them. He began to plan secretly. He transferred part of his assets to offshore accounts, investigated countries without extradition treaties, calculated how long his money would last if they lived modestly somewhere remote. For a few days, the idea of simply disappearing with the children seemed like the only solution, but during a conversation with his daughter, reality hit him like a lightning bolt. "Daddy, why do you look so sad?" she asked, her eyes still fragile but full of genuine love. "I'm just thinking about how to protect you both," he replied, stroking her hair. "But running away doesn't solve anything," said his daughter, with a wisdom that surprised him. "The mean aunt who took me was also running away from something. Running away only creates more problems." At that moment, he realized that he was repeating the same patterns that had caused all the problems. The emotional escape that had made him an absent father, the flight from responsibility that had led to the suffering of innocent children. Fleeing physically would only be another layer of cowardice. It was then that the loyal housekeeper made a decision that would change everything. For months, she had observed the cruel stepmother's manipulations, her whispered conversations on the phone, her secret meetings. As someone who had worked in the house for decades, she was practically invisible to the younger mistress, who treated her as part of the furniture. The housekeeper had started secretly recording these conversations with an old recorder that she had kept since her days working as a secretary before becoming a domestic. The evidence she collected was devastating. Blackmail, corruption, manipulation of legal documents, and embezzlement of family company funds. "Sir, you need to see this," she said one morning, handing over a folder full of papers and the recorder. "Your sister isn't just trying to get rid of the girl. She's been stealing from the company for years." The recordings revealed that the stepmother had diverted millions in investment profits, creating fake accounts and transferring dividends to herself. She had used the crisis with the children as a smokescreen to hide her criminal activities, hoping that the eventual full inheritance would erase any evidence of her theft. The final confrontation took place in the presence of lawyers, accountants, and the community leader who had come to fetch the beggar girl. When the evidence was presented, the cruel stepmother's mask of sophistication finally fell. "You don't understand," she shouted, her elegance giving way to despair. "I built half of this fortune. I managed investments, multiplied the family's capital. Why should he get everything just because he's a man?" "You were entitled to your share," replied the millionaire, his voice as cold as ice. "But you had no right to steal, nor to hurt innocent children to hide your crimes." The discovery of the embezzlement led to an investigation that unraveled a network of corruption involving several company employees. The ambitious lawyer who had helped the stepmother was also exposed, losing his professional license and facing criminal charges. But the real turning point came when the community leader, impressed with how the millionaire had handled the crisis, made an unexpected proposal. "We want our girl to be happy," she said, looking at the two children playing together in the garden. "If she chooses to stay, but you commit to never forgetting where she came from, maybe we can find a middle ground." The solution that emerged was more beautiful than anything the millionaire could have imagined. Using part of the fortune recovered from his sister's embezzlement, he established a community center in the neighborhood where the beggar girl had grown up. The center offered education, food, and shelter for street children, honoring the memory of the girl's mother and all the others who had suffered in poverty. The beggar girl chose to stay, but on the condition that she would regularly visit her community of origin and help other children in similar situations. The two girls grew up together, one constantly reminding the other about the importance of gratitude and social responsibility. The millionaire finally found a genuine purpose for his wealth, no longer the obsessive accumulation of capital, but the conscious use of his resources to create real change in the world. His financial investments now included social investments, funds directed towards education and community projects. The loyal housekeeper was promoted to administrator of the community center, finally recognized for her decades of silent dedication. The woman who had kidnapped the millionaire's daughter received appropriate treatment and years later would become a volunteer at the same center, finding purpose in helping other families reunite. The two girls, now growing up in an environment of genuine love and social responsibility, learned that true wealth was not in accumulated money, but in human connections and in the ability to transform pain into compassion. Their drawings of birds no longer represented escape, but freedom conquered through love and justice.